I remember. I know.
I'm sorry, what?
But
Oh, yeah?
there's only one in there. They're all gone. We must have sold them all.
That must be very
Yeah.
meditative.
I only saw one.
I get lost.
I think we sold some at Sienna.
Yeah.
We went there last time. Yes. I need to figure out how much that was.
Well, I sold one, we got one, and so that's four.
Yeah.
4 times 10.
Okay. 40.
4 times 10, is that 40?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah? Do you ever sell them or do you just do it for yourself?
Now I started to sell them. Now I got my some of my illustrations in an art gallery.
Oh, really?
So
Nice.
we'll see. We just did it last month.
Let's see.
So hopefully that they'll start to sell as people see it more and more.
Cool. Do you have a website?
Not yet. I'm developing one right now.
Okay.
It's also
Sure. That's funny.
The lens cut on those is very, and they're, it's real strong, so
Finish.
just smell from
On
maybe
the
there.
inside, this has.
They're the reflective or something. On the inside, yeah. So, yeah, they were. No, yours are good. I mean, that's good. No, it's good. I like them.
Yeah, they must have a very small head, so I have way too big for people.
Yes.
Okay, that's what you're really posting.
Yeah, 'cause I like that. I like that so much.
How are you guys?
Good. How are
We're
you?
good.
Wow, you know.
We're thawing out a little
I'm
bit.
gonna read just one page. And I was so engrossed in it, even though it got a little heady.
In this chapter?
Yeah.
Oh, this chapter is it's long. I know.
And I'm like, okay, wait, and so I'm writing questions down as I'm reading, and then as I keep reading. Yeah. Except for.
I'm trying to remember. He sold some of these at Sienna because I only have one
And that's over here now.
left.
And I sold one,
Okay.
and there were 6 to begin with. Let's see, let me do the math one more time. Minus 2 is 4 times 10. Go in there.
Okay. Do you know where the money went from the ones in?
I have it all. I have all
Oh,
the
you
money.
have it all.
He has it all, he knows everything.
Can I see our books?
You look at the prodigal son?
No.
That's what I'm gonna look at.
Is this what we're gonna do next time? Is that what we're doing?
Oh, no, I just
Not necessarily.
brought the box.
Just in case.
It's my reference book.
Okay. Where's the time go? How is it already 2:30? Man, I thought we had more time to play to mess around before we start.
Probably not.
We need to finish the question of evil.
Yeah.
Oh, water everywhere.
Mm-hmm. I do.
Oh, yeah, the Oscars are tonight. They are. I can't remember the first time I ever saw the Oscars. It had to be so long ago. Hi, Jillian.
Hello.
Hey, Julian, hi.
What else? Should do.
Time, huh?
Yeah,
Ready.
it's
Oh,
time.
gosh. I didn't even do our little label yet here. Dweller on the threshold. We didn't talk about Dweller on the threshold last time.
Oh,
We have to recap a little bit about.
okay.
We're gonna do the next Tuesday, second Sunday and fourth Sunday. Are we still on for that? I need to put it in
I think so. We have a few more chapters to cover.
yeah,
Yeah, we may as well
hand me the
keep it the same for the.
calendar and
Oh, good.
I'll make sure we're still on. Whoever gets on here first gets it.
Oh, okay.
Or
You don't want to get kicked out.
or have to stay out front or something. Like regular.
Yeah.
March. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
9 to 5, they're got. 9 to 5, shit.
What?
Yeah. Oh, wait a minute, that's,
Because I use it all the time. I'm better at this than I thought.
so that's.
That's the first.
Okay.
We okay? Good thing we changed to second and fourth.
Yeah, I know, right?
Should I say, Mayor, would that be better? Or
How do you look?
instead
You
of-
look okay?
Presentable.
Mayor.
Presentable. I checked my makeup. You know.
It's also understandable. Holy cow.
Shucks. Darn, gosh. Gee, sheesh. Sheesh.
Roger, are we ready for the second and fourth? Sundays of the month?
Yeah, we're still.
Are we okay with that?
Yeah.
It's a little yellow, but it's less harsh than.
It'll get brighter.
Oh, it does?
No, those have been on for a while.
So.
All right, let's do a little meditation, everyone. 3 minutes late, but that's just my style, I guess. 3 minutes late. Okay, tall spine and everything in the body is as relaxed as possible, except for the spine. Keep the spine erect. Begin to smooth the breath. Slow inhale, slow exhale. Notice the muscles in the face and relax those. We tend to tense the forehead, the area around our eyes, sometimes even the lips and the jaw. So relax all those muscles. Just let the emotions, let the energy just calm and settle. Join me in an Om. Inhale. Om. during the next moment or two, just commit to focusing your awareness and your attention on spiritual study. Inhale. Slowly come back. Take your time. A couple of quick notes on that Om sound. By the way, we were very much in harmony today. That was nice. It's different teachers chant. Exactly. We've had, and this is our 17th practice right now.
Whoa.
Different teachers teach the sound differently. And it's generally spelled O-M, but it can also be spelled A-U-M. I believe Alice Bailey spells it A-U-M. And it's generally said that when you're making the physical sound with your vocal cords, 1/3 of it is the open mouth sound, and 2/3 of it is the closed mouth sound, which is the M in English language. And the purpose of the longer closed mouth is that it resonates differently in your head, and it creates more of a vibration, actually. The ah, ooh, or the O sound is more of an open, expansive sound. And then when you go to the M sound, it vibrates internally more, and it brings your attention even more inward. So the majority of it should be the M. A lot of times in yoga classes, if you hear people chant, it's all ah the whole time. And at the very last second, it's just and they're done. But the majority of it should be the closed mouth, and it kind of turns things inward. You can feel it inside your head and bring your attention to that Ajna chakra, which is the middle of the brain, which is where cognitive faculties are ignited and prepared, focused, and all that. So.
There's an entire branch of yoga called mantra yoga, and it's the scientific exploration of the power of different sounds. Remember that the world, and we're going to get into this later, the world was created by sound. The word logos actually means word, and in the beginning was the word. So everything is vibration, whether it results in a physical sound because we have ears, it doesn't matter. There is always some kind of instrument that can perceive any vibration. We're not aware of all the vibrations around us, but someone is. And each one of those vibrations has a quality. So mantra yoga is all about the scientific understanding of the power of sounds.
Mm-hmm. Physical sounds and metaphysical sounds, and actually light waves too. Everything in the physical universe does vibrate. And a lot of the vibrations are visible to our physical eyes, but a lot of them are not. Same thing with the sounds, with the audible sounds.
There's no one there to hear it.
Does a
If
tree
there's-
make a noise?
There's
Yeah.
vibration, but there's no sound, there's no one can-
Well,
no one can observe it.
it depends on what you call sound.
Depends on the
Um,
definition. Yeah.
Think of a raisin suspended in a bowl of jello. Can you move that raisin without it affecting the rest of the jello? You can't.
I'll
Have you
think
tried?
about-
There's
I'll
nothing-
think about that.
There's nothing in the universe that can operate without it affecting someone or something else. And in fact, it affects everything. So whether we perceive it or not, it still affects us. So whether we call it sound or whether we call it sight or any other perception of vibrations, it affects absolutely everything. Remember the butterfly effect?
Yeah, and not only that, like if no one's there, you're talking about no one person, but plants here,
Oh, that's true.
Exactly.
You know,
Minerals even.
yes, anything, inanimate objects, they're all here.
Well, this is actually going to be a part of our lesson today.
Oh, okay, take that.
Jerry's done.
Is the lighting good for your online people?
Oh, the screen looks good to me.
Okay.
I like it like.
If we turned out
I
the
like
lights
it like
completely,
this.
I'll look even better.
Softer without the neon.
Much.
Much.
All right, this is our 17th class, and we're on chapter 10, which is fine. However, we didn't finish chapter 9, so let's discuss a little bit more about chapter 9, the question of evil, before we jump into chapter 10. And if there are any concepts that you'd like to revisit as well from earlier in the chapter, please let us know. So we talked about theodicy and the question of why is there evil in the world when there's supposed to be this God who is all powerful and all good and all wise, and why would he allow that? Why would he allow suffering? Why is there so much pain when he's supposed to be good and he's supposed to be able to manage everything? And we've talked quite a bit about that. We discussed the concept of ultimate good and ultimate evil as well, and we debunked the idea of there being either. We were mythbusters. There's no ultimate on either end. It just is. The universe just is. And whatever we label an event or an action or a sensation, that's what it is. If we label something as unpleasant, it is. If we label something as evil, it's the work of the devil. Well, we're creating that. There is no ultimate. There is no guy with horns that looks like he has red skin and lives in somewhere that's all full of flames. There isn't, unless we make it in our mind.
This is a popular concept in all stories. You have to have a protagonist and an antagonist. You have to have a fight of some sort to make it interesting. And life provides lots of that. As soon as you have any duality, you've got conflict. And that's what life is. Remember, either last time or the time before, we talked about the tension that is life. When that tension is gone, that's when everything subsides and is just resting. But as soon as you've got any kind of manifestation, you then have activity and you've got this push and pull of life.
What he said. Let's see. So we got as far as, the dweller on the threshold, which is the last part of the last chapter. Actually, did we make that up? I think we made that up. That's not actually in the chapter.
That's not in the chapter.
See that?
I'm like looking for.
Does anybody know where the term came from?
Well,
Dweller on the threshold.
Shakespeare.
I just realized it's not in the chapter.
How many of you have heard of Lord Bulwer Lytton? I bet you've heard of one of the beginning of one of his novels.
The dweller on
One of his novels begins with, "It was a dark and stormy night."
Oh, yeah.
But he also wrote some other novels of a metaphysical nature. And in one of them, Zanoni is the name of it. He has not really a character, but a term that he uses called the dweller on the threshold. And other metaphysical writers have picked that up and used it. So in theosophical terms, when we talk about dweller on the threshold, we're talking about the lowest part of our personal being aspect. For example, no person is just at one particular level in their advancement. Think of it as a range, like a sliding portion of a scale. So if you have a slider that moves along, there's a lower part of that slider and an upper part. So as we progress through our spiritual path, we are moving along that scale. But we're, instead of being at a particular point, we have a lower threshold and we have an upper threshold. So the upper, of course, is the most spiritual moments of our life, usually in meditation, when we are experiencing whatever is the highest that that particular person can experience as far as a spiritual experience. But we also have a lower threshold. And we refer to that as the dweller on the threshold. That's, for some people, their dark side. And for some people, it's really dark, like murderously dark. But for most people, it's not anywhere near that bad. It may just be that you have a nasty temper, or that you get short with people, or that you have a big ego and you trample on people sometimes. So whatever your defaults are, or your not defaults, your faults, your failings, or your whatever you haven't overcome yet,
Character flaws. and such.
character flaws, that's your dweller on the threshold. That's what you have to deal with in your darkest moments, so to speak. So it varies it's different for every single person. So in one sense, we have an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other. So sometimes you're acting according to your highest nature, and sometimes you're acting according to your lowest nature. And it's neither good nor bad. It's just the way it is. So whenever you come across that term, the dweller on the threshold, and there's another term too that kind of relates to that, called the dark night of the soul. So you've probably heard that term. And it's the same thing when you're dealing with the lowest part of your nature and moving through that. So that the intent, of course, is to always be moving up the scale.
And there's even another concept that this guy talks about, and the way to start recognizing that part of us, that nature that we don't always want to acknowledge, is to shine light on it now, recognize it. And that's why we love our favorite teacher, Eckhart Tolle, so much. And that's why we put so much about emotions into our book that we've written, because learning how to address it now and to dissipate that dark part of us now makes the whole process a little bit easier when it does come time to have that final battle. Even though there are many battles inside of ourselves throughout our entire journey. Eckhart Tolle talks all about the ego, and then the causation of the ego, which is the pain body. So the pain body, it might not be the exact same thing as the dweller on the threshold, but it's part of the cause, the ignition for the dweller to rear its head. And I want to read just a small quote from Eckhart Tolle about what the pain body is and why it's so powerful for many people.
That's well worn.
I know, right? I should
That's
have
a
gotten the
good sign.
hardcover one. It is good. I got notes all in it and everything. He says, because of the human tendency to perpetuate old emotion, almost everyone carries in his or her energy field an accumulation of old emotional pain, which I call the pain body. We can, however, stop adding to the pain body that we already have. And that's the point. Stop adding to it and recognize what's there. We can learn to break the habit of accumulating and perpetuating old emotion by flapping our wings, metaphorically speaking, and refrain from mentally dwelling on the past, regardless of whether something happened yesterday or 30 years ago. We can learn not to keep situations or events alive in our minds, but to return our attention continuously to the pristine, timeless present moment, rather than being caught up in mental movie making. I like that alliteration. Our very presence then becomes our identity rather than our thoughts and emotions. The dweller on the threshold wouldn't have any power if we continuously lived in the present moment, because this is the practical part. This is the tactical steps on how to make that battle less harmful. Stop dwelling in the past, which is where which is where suffering actually happens, past and future, regrets and anticipations. The present moment doesn't have those in the now. There's no suffering in the now. And that's kind of controversial, but we trust what this guy says and we put it into practice ourselves. So the pain body is what we have to shine that flashlight on.
By the way, I was reading the comments on a YouTube section, and one of them was in German, and I just glanced. I don't speak German, but I was glancing through it, and one of the words was Tola. So I thought, so of course Google, what does Tola mean in German? It means amazing. I thought that was great that his name means amazing.
We have our friend in Costa Rica who's joined us.
Ah, okay. So Eugene and his mother are joining us in Costa Rica. And other people. Who else do we have?
Silva, who has been joining us
Silva,
over here,
okay.
she's not feeling well today.
Oh,
And she didn't want to infect anyone with what she had. So she,
well, that's
those were her
nice.
words.
Yeah.
Not mine. Mark Silva. who else?
okay.
So how do we eliminate evil from the world, Terry?
Quite simply, you eliminate it within yourself, and that's the only thing you can do. So you inspire others, and you. One of the things the Buddha said was, cease to do evil, learn to do good. It's that simple. Stop making life difficult for yourself and for other people, and make it better for everyone.
It's so interesting when you actually think about it. We want to stop all the wars in the world and bring peace to the Middle East, as they say, you know. But you have to consider the fact, do you ever get angry? Do you ever have any negative feelings inside yourself? How can the world be peaceful if we perpetuate our own negative feelings, right? People don't usually look at it that way. If we start to live in a more positive fashion, then it's going to be a slow process. It's not going to be like the snap of the fingers, but that's how it works. That's how to do it. Just start with us. Look at the man in the mirror. Didn't Michael Jackson teach us that?
Yeah, we talked about that last time.
If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make the change. I mean, he was the yogi, Michael Jackson.
I have a question.
Ooh, I just knocked the microphone.
I believe in this ideal of being good, gentle, kind, loving, compassionate, eliminating evil. But in this world, we are confronted with people, the ultimate, our president, who attacks people constantly. I mean, how do you deal with negativity and evil coming at you from others?
Well, we've talked about this before, especially when we talked about karma. The leaders that every country have are there because they represent the current karma of that nation. Think about that. We get what we deserve. That doesn't mean I personally or you personally, but the overall general tone or quality of the populace of that country determines who gets elected as their leaders. And think about it. Who gets elected are the people that they look up to or admire, or who they feel represent them. You're like me. Okay, I'm going to vote for you. So we get what we deserve as a nation. And everybody, it's not punishment. It's just the way it is. It's life operating the way it's supposed to operate. And the only thing we can do, again, is do our little bit. What's the saying? Lift where you stand. You do your little tiny bit of lifting where you happen to be, and all of the millions of other people who are trying to be better and to make the world a better place are doing their little bit of lifting. And believe me, the world is far better than it was 100 years ago, and vastly better than it was 1,000 years ago. So it is moving in the right direction, even though we may not perceive it from day to day.
I just want to say that you could think of it as a lesson too. Like, so I know how you feel about the president or whoever it is, and you could say, okay, am I giving into that anger? Am I gonna take from him that anger and maybe feel that way about someone who voted for him? Like, you have to still remain your solid, good person, even though you feel like it's coming at you or you're angry about it. I think it's a lesson for all of us. Like, how are we going to react to this leader who we maybe don't believe in, or we disagree with. So I think it's just our own personal lesson when it comes to something that we don't like or dislike. We're gonna still stay the same so that we don't get sucked into it maybe.
This is an excellent opportunity for us to practice what we are learning, which is
Non-reaction.
non-reaction. Non-reaction.
What if you're attacked though? I mean, what about survival?
Physically, mentally, emotionally,
Always.
always. We always have the right to defend ourselves and, more importantly, other people who are not able to, those who are weaker. We not only have a right, but an obligation to help and defend them. So you can defend people, but to return, to attack someone else because you disagree with them doesn't really help anything. It demeans you and it demeans everybody.
You're bringing up a big concept, though. I didn't mean to interrupt
Yeah,
you,
go
but I
ahead.
wanted to add. You're bringing up a much bigger concept about this idea of how we do anything, right? How we do it. So healthy boundaries is what I think you're talking about is protecting ourselves, right? You said, how do you deal with negative energy? Your first question was, how do you deal with negative energy coming at you? You said specifically from the president, but then you added, what if you're physically attacked? Well, first of all, you have to protect yourself, whether it's physically, of course, and also emotionally, mentally. And boundaries have to do with all those realms. We need to make sure we're taken care of. So if we are not being taken care, if we're not taking care of ourselves, we have to first do that. Now, if the negativity that's coming at us from the media, for example, from the TV, it's easy to remove yourself from that. It's relatively easy.
It's called
Yeah,
hit the off
the,
button.
the president doesn't directly affect any of us. I'm fairly certain of that. So it's easy to protect yourself from that. It's easy. Just don't pay attention to it. I know it's not always simple because it's in front of us so much, but we have the certain ability to remove ourselves if we need to. Now, from a physical perspective, if negativity is coming at us, yes, we have the ultimate responsibility to take care of ourselves. We have to be able to defend ourselves, and as Terry said, others who can't. Now, we talk about non-reaction and acceptance all the time. We have to always, I'm realizing this, we have to always give the caveat that it's not a passive thing. It's not just sitting back and letting everyone shoot arrows at you and just, it's not martyrdom or anything like that. We have to protect ourselves, but it's going back to what I first said a second ago, it's the method by which we do it. It's not the knee-jerk type of reaction or response. It's the conscious evaluation of the situation, and then it's mindful action. So it's acting with full awareness, full consciousness. How do I consciously address this situation? It's not emotional. Yes, we have to protect ourselves physically. If someone's attacking you, yeah, you can fight back and do what you need to do, but it's not out of just anger. You know, our face isn't turning red, our neck isn't going to explode from our own anger. It's a conscious way of protection, of fighting back, perhaps. I hope that makes sense.
An advanced yogi, an adept, for example, if he were physically attacked by someone, would never turn around and attack that individual in turn, feeling justified. Instead, they would create whatever barrier they needed to stop it and to prevent any damage, but they would not retaliate. It would strictly be protection and not retaliation.
We don't have the abilities that adepts do by
No, we don't.
building a force.
Well, what about
Force
karate? Taking a
field.
self-defense course,
But
being
it's
able to
not only
block.
physical attacks, emotional, mental.
Sure.
And you say there are ways that the president affects us. Our taxes, for example. I mean, the policies that he makes do affect us. So, you know, we have to be involved to a certain degree.
It affects our lives. Yes, it does. And so does everything else.
Yeah.
Even those who are supposedly well-intentioned often end up harming us in one way or another. So what we're trying to do, as Paul said, I think, is live the yoga way of life, which is be aware, be informed, but don't react and don't be part of the fight that's going on. Because guess what? It's any energy that you put into it does nothing but keep that fight going.
I just want to say one last thing. So my friend recently said to me, I was upset about something in a situation. It was a real serious situation that I was upset about. And he said, that's okay, but you don't have to let it absorb you. And that what really helped me step out of it. And it's still the same serious situation, but I'm not absorbed by it. It's not sucking me in and sucking my energy and upsetting me the way it was before. It's still something I'm going to handle and deal with. But him saying, don't absorb it, really like hit me hard. And that helped me a lot to kind of take myself out of it. Still know that it's important, but take myself out of the emotion of it. That kind of helped.
Remember that in all cases, most people are coming from the point of view as it shouldn't be that way. Well, yes, it should be that way. It can't be any other way because we created it. It's the world's karma. It's the result of everything that has happened in the past and is happening currently. So it can't be otherwise. So acceptance is the very best thing we can do.
And also looking for blessings in the situation. You know, I mean, I'm tested every day. So whether it be, emotionally or spiritually, not physically, thank God, but I always look at, and just like you said, I don't get absorbed in it anymore. I used to, whatever it is. And right now in situations politically, without getting into politics, I look at the blessings, because there are many things now being revealed that never were. Okay, for whatever reason, that's happening too. So, I try to look in situations like this for any kind of a blessing. And I love your idea about not being absorbed, by the situation. And that helped a lot.
No progress ever happens smoothly. It happens in fits and starts. And it's like a pendulum. It swings one way and then it swings the other way. And it swings back and forth. And that's just life. That's how everything works. And little by little, it's not just one individual that you're concerned with. We're billions of people who are operating as a very dysfunctional family. But we, as a whole, are moving forward. And that's just how life works. So to get tense and upset about things doesn't help anybody, and especially not you. So the best thing you can do is be aware and observe it and be at peace with yourself and with whatever is happening. Everything's just like it's supposed to be.
One more concept to chew on with acceptance. You mentioned taxes do affect us. Of course they do. When you practice this idea of being equanimous, just even keeled, it doesn't mean that you can't be continuously observing for ways to improve the situation. Now, when you accept, that means that you're not reacting, that you're not fighting back. It doesn't mean you can't evaluate and see what can be done. Now, for a situation like the tax structure in America, ask yourself, is there anything that I can actually do about that? If there is something that you can do, by all means do it. But likely there's not really much you or I can do about that right now. If you're mad that the president is doing this or that, taxes or this or that, or something is happening in the economy that you don't like, is there really something I can do about it? If there is, do it. Run for office. Start picketing. Start creating something on social media. Whatever you feel is right for you to do. And if you decide that there isn't something that you can do, why ruminate? Why dwell? Why allow it to absorb you? Eckhart Tolle says that it's insanity. If you allow that to absorb you, why? That's the thing. That's where acceptance comes in. If you evaluate it and you realize there's nothing that I can do right now to change the situation, what are your choices? Either get mad about it and affect yourself, stab yourself with daggers, or accept. it's a constant practice.
We better start on the next chapter.
Chapter 10. The plan and purpose of life. So in my little introductory email, I said this chapter is the most important. But every single chapter I love. Every single one I think is amazing. But what bigger question that can you ask about life other than what is the purpose of it?
What's
Why
it
are
all
we,
about?
why the heck do we have a physical body? Why are we spirits experiencing a physical incarnation? Why? Well, this chapter tells us why.
Actually, that's the entire premise of existentialism. That was a movement that came along in philosophical and in the art community, writers, etc. I don't know, a century or so ago, when people started asking, well, first of all, you have to start with the premise that 150 years ago, almost the entire world was religious by nature. They were born into a particular religion, whatever it was, Buddhist, Hindu, Taoist, whatever. And they generally didn't change. But a little over 100 years ago, secularism started making a rise. Before that time, most countries were married to whatever the official religion was for that country, whether it was Church of England or Catholicism or Christianity or Buddhism, etc., etc. It was completely inextricably linked to the religion. In fact, for example, in England, no one was allowed to become a judge if they did not believe in God. Not allowed. So secularism started becoming more popular, and secular movements, it took decades to make any kind of progress because there was a lot of opposition. But over time, secularism is now to the point where I think in America, 25% of the population says that they are none of the above when someone asks, what religion do you belong to? None. And so it has become stronger and stronger. And so as existentialism became more of a, or as secularism became more and more of an accepted way of life, and governments started divorcing themselves from the religious leaders of whatever the leading religion was, then people started saying, because previous to that, the purpose of life was determined by your religion. Well, this is your purpose. We're going to tell you what your purpose is. So when you don't have a religion, now what? It's like, oh, what's my purpose now? Well, you get to make it up. You get to decide what it is, nice. Or at least that's what science says. Scientists say there is no purpose to life. It happens. And what's the term?
A fortuitous concourse of atoms.
It just happened. It just happened. And consciousness inexplicably came about too, we're not sure how, but it did. So science says there is no purpose to life. You create your own purpose. Theosophy is a little bit different, but I'm just giving you a little bit of background here about where this whole question of what's it all about comes from.
Being in the yoga community, we're around a lot of new age people and people who are spiritual in nature. And this question does get brought up a lot, and it's fun to talk about it and see what people think. And almost always people that I hang out with say the purpose of life is to be happy, or that's one of the two. There are usually two deciding answers to the purpose of be happy or just love, not to love, but just love. Love is the purpose. I don't even really know what that means, to be honest. Like when someone says the purpose is love, what does that actually even mean? Does it mean to understand love, to experience love from another, to give love, to be in love, to fall, to get married? What is
It's a
purpose of
hippie theory.
yes, it is. So most people think it's either to be happy or just love is the purpose. So what do you guys think the purpose of life is? Wait, Jerry. Hey, Bob, how are you, Jerry?
I ever since I've been on this particular path that I'm on, I've come to believe that I'm here because I'm learning to create those indelible lines on my soul with each life that I live to be closer to spirit. And I do that as much as I can, if not all the time, through love. So that's my belief.
Bob, did you have something?
Yeah, love is life's only valuable
Oh.
expression.
I knew he would
You have to
answer.
remember these.
He slides right in and just starts talking.
Life's only valuable expression, L-O-V-E.
Back in Europe, even up through the Dark Ages, you had two options. You either were Catholic or you were dead. There was 700 years in Spain where the Muslims, the Jews, and the Christians lived in peace and harmony. So it can be done until the lady that gave money for Christopher Columbus to Queen Isabella. She's the one that says, okay, you've got three options now. You can either be a Catholic, you can die, or you can leave. So most of the Muslims went back across over into Africa. Now, one of the things that really hurt the Catholic Church that most people don't realize was the Gutenberg press. And what happened is when Martin Luther started his triad about the Catholics, he had them print the Bible in German, which we were just talking about a couple of minutes ago. Now, you don't have to go to a Catholic school to learn Latin. You can, if you're German, you can actually just pick up a Bible and read it, and that's it. So that really hurt, that really changed life in Europe.
The key to enlightenment is always learning and information. That's why, to me, I think that the biggest role of government is education. It should be. If it's not, is educating people. The Gutenberg press, of course, was a quantum leap in information dissemination. And what is the most recent one? Internet.
Yeah.
Internet has changed everything. In the most remote areas of the world, if you've got at least an internet connection, you've got everything at your fingertips.
Terry talked about the scientific view of the purpose of life, where everything just happens by chance. And there are generally three ideas of how life came about. And that's one, just some kind of organic materials were in a pond of goop and then lightning struck it. Then consciousness magically appeared. That's not magically, I'll take that word out, but just appeared from somehow. We don't know. That's the scientific view. Then there's a second view, which is basically fatalism or predeterminism. There are several different philosophical terms for it, where there isn't any choice or free will. Life somehow appeared, and then but it's determined. We don't have the ability to choose or to do anything about life. That's kind of the middle one.
I think Mark Twain called that pre-order for destination.
Okay, that's a tongue twister.
He used a term like that in his book Huck Finn when they went to church, and he was making fun of the idea of for a predestination and foreordination, meaning everything is predetermined. So it was just a word he made up.
There are other variations on that term as well. Predeterminism, causal determinism, which does believe in karma, but still we don't have the ability. And then hard determinism. There are lots of. I was just trying to find all the different ideas people have on the purpose of life, and these are all different.
So predestination,
Yeah.
foreordination, fate, kismet, they're all terms meaning the same thing, basically.
And then there's a third concept about the purpose of life, which is what theosophy teaches, and that there is an order in the cosmos. There is a reason for it existing, and it's been created by an intelligence, by a divine mind, not by God. It's different than the idea of a God creating everything. It's the idea of an absolute intelligent energy that more or less expands and contracts worlds or universes, call them what you will, with defined laws and free will and choice, which is what humans have. So John Algeo, the author of this book, he talks about how this order of the universe, the fact that there are laws there, that implies that there is a plan to existence. And this is a curious idea that Terry and I were trying to figure out what he means by this. The fact that we have choice, that implies that there's a purpose. And what he actually means by that is the fact that we can choose things gives us the effects of those choices. Now, the effects of those choices, karma, allows us to grow from them. Whatever hurts should give us a lesson and show us how to choose differently next time. Whatever feels good usually means that's the right choice, and we do more of that. So that's the purpose. That's what theosophy teaches is the purpose of life. Choosing things, doing things, receiving the effects of those things, and then learning from them. That's the purpose of life. That's what theosophy says we have physical bodies for, to do things, learn from them. Either grow or don't grow. And if we don't grow, it's usually painful. If we grow, we figure out how life works and we do more of that. And we expand even more. That's why we're here.
And that's where education comes in.
Exactly. It is education.
The big thing I learned about going to college was learning to think. That meant more to me than anything else.
And learning how to learn.
Learning how to-
That was the biggest thing I got out of college was learning how to learn something. So just to reemphasize what Paul said, in the theosophical concept, everything has intelligence. There's a universal intelligence, a universal mind. There's a cosmic mind. And these are far beyond what we can even begin to comprehend. So science, for example, believes that the human mind is the greatest thing that has ever existed that we know of. They don't know but what there's an alien civilization that's more advanced, possibly. But from the scientific point of view, the human mind is the ultimate. And therefore, those who believe that they are among the most elite in their scientific fields believe that there's nothing greater than they are as far as intelligence. It's a great concept. Well, it's an interesting concept, but it doesn't allow much room for expanding your idea of just how much more we could be advanced. It's kind of self-limiting, I think.
No, they forget that our other mind is our solar plexus. That's a mind.
That is our more primitive mind, so to speak.
Correct.
Yeah,
So that has a lot to do.
would be equivalent or analogous to the instinct that animals have and this kind of group think. We feel that sort of thing more in the solar plexus, as Bob says. It's sort of like the cerebellum is the, our primitive brain. And the cerebrum is the more advanced human brain.
How many times did we say, I felt it in my gut?
Yeah, exactly.
And that.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, yoga philosophy takes that a step further and talks about each of the chakras having their own intelligence as well. And there are 7 main focal points of energy, of prana. And prana, which is our force that vivifies our body, is said to be intelligent in itself. And whenever there's a collection of prana, there's a collection of intelligence. And so we have 7 centers in our body where intelligence gathers. The brain is the one we use for most of our thinking capacities, and that's the ajna center, or the third eye. But of course, there's one at the solar plexus, and then there's one right at the heart. And a lot of times we feel things in our heart as well. As many times as we have the gut feeling, we have emotions and heart-centered activity, right? And then there's communication here, and there are other ones, and there are actually other minor centers in the body as well. But as Terry mentioned, everything has intelligence. It's not just our brain. Yeah, and I think where you were going with that is that even though the human brain is quite amazing, there are far more advanced consciousnesses, is that the plural of consciousness, that exist, that physical science won't admit to yet, because the physical equipment can't detect them. But when a universe is created, science doesn't really talk about why it was created or even how. They don't really know how the Big Bang occurred. They just know something banged. Something banged. And they're actually starting to talk about quite often that there was existence before the Big Bang, and there are other bangs happening that we can't detect. Most of the scientists have agreed that there is an actual end to the observable physical universe. So the obvious question then becomes, what's on the other side of that physical? Well, that's where they're talking about other big bangs and other universes and the multiverse and parallel dimensions and things. So mainstream scientists are starting to understand that all that we think we know is not all that there is. There is more out there. In Hindu philosophy, the idea of the expansion of the universe is what they refer to as the out-breath of Brahma. That's the Hindu creator, the out-breath, and it's a cycle. There will be an in-breath when the universe dissolves again, and then another out-breath. And that's the Big Bang and the expansion and contraction. We want to talk about let's. All right. The Grand Saga. I guess we should follow our outline here.
Yeah.
Good idea. Anyone familiar with the story of the prodigal son in the Bible?
Yes.
Does anyone feel confident enough to give us a summary of what the prodigal son's story is?
Entitlement.
Entitlement? Okay. Should we read it?
Actually, forgiveness is there too. Because when the son came back, the father forgave him. So that's another part
And don't be jealous.
Experience,
How about
right? Gaining experience.
Yes. Gaining experience?
enlightenment?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Involution.
Involution. Yeah, that's a fun vocabulary word. And involution and then evolution. It's the cycle. Are you raising your hand?
Oh, no.
I thought. I was like,
I know
is Jillian going to talk when I put the camera
No.
on her? You've heard this 100 times because you've come to my yoga philosophy classes. But so the journey of the prodigal son, Terry and I changed it a little bit. We took the liberty to make it more
Theosophical.
Yeah, exactly. To make it more applicable to the grand journey of the soul, which is what we believe the story was written after anyway. But it's the journey of the son going out into the world to gain experience. And it's the very first thing that we've written in our book. It's our own version of the prodigal son. The idea that the son asks the father for his portion of the family holding in order to go experience what the world has to offer. Yes, he could have remained at home. Oh, thank you. Where everything is perfect and blissful at his father's wealthy estate. Everything is provided for. There's no concern. There's no issue. Everything is blissful. However, the son knows that there's a grand world out there that he has yet to experience or has not experienced. And the father knows that this is very valuable when the son comes and asks for his share of the fortune. So that the wise father gladly gives the son his share of the family fortune, while the other brother looks and says, what the heck is this guy doing? He's going to squander all of the money that our father's giving him. And then the journey ensues. He goes out into the world. He does, and that's part of the learning experience, right?
Exactly.
He goes into the world, uses his money. He fumbles around with, well, I call it fumbling when you're out partying all night and experiencing all the all the pleasures and the indulgences and meeting friends and getting bored with those friends and going on to the next town and meeting new friends, and then realizing one day that, oh gosh, what have I been doing? I don't have any more money in my pocket to pay for food. I better learn
Our
how to work.
friends.
Or pay for my friends, exactly. I better learn how to work. Well, I don't know how to work. What do I do? So the story of the son, the prodigal son, he has to figure out how to survive and fend for himself. And that's the nadir. Anyone know that term? N-A-D-I-R? So there's the apex and nadir, right? So when he realizes he's destitute, that's where he
At the
better,
very bottom.
the very bottom, and he better learn how
Hit rock bottom.
hit rock bottom. He better learn how to evolve, right? Evolve his awareness and learn some things about life. So he learns how to work, learns how to get a job, realizes that he can do these things for himself. And then he has a dream one night that he has a comfortable home that may or may not be there if he ever decides to go back and search for it and return. But he decides that he wants to try and reunite, rejoin with his father back home. And it's been many, 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 many years, and he's a changed man now, and he retraces his steps back through the different villages and towns that he was in, and no one recognizes him because he's changed. He's a different person now. And eventually he returns to his family's boundary, and his father welcomes him home. What does his dad say when he comes back? He turns to the servant and says, go kill the fattest calf we have and prepare a feast for my son. It's a reunion. And then the other son who never left wonders why the father is welcoming him back with open arms. And the wise father turns to the older son and says, your brother has returned with vast experience and knowledge. It's only fitting that we welcome him home. And then the story ends. And the question is, which of the two sons are more fit to receive the family estate upon the father's death? Which one is more suited to manage it? And it's the son, it's clearly the son who has all the experience, who's gone to the world and gained the experience. So that's the analogy of the soul coming into the physical world and gaining experience.
So the drive that makes somebody want to leave what they've got to experience something new is innate in all creation, in everything, minerals, plants, animals. It's this, once we are in manifestation, there's something within us that drives us forward to experience what is around us and to try to comprehend, try to perceive, try to understand. Remember, our senses developed over eons of time. First was just a sense of being, and then secondly was touch, feeling, and then hearing, and then sight, and then smell. So all of these develop very, very slowly throughout all of the different kingdoms that this consciousness perceives. I want to refer to something in our book that's right in the first chapter on page 14. It says, as an ancient Kabbalistic maxim says, the breath becomes a stone, the stone a plant, the plant an animal, the animal a man, the man a spirit, and the spirit a god. This is exactly what this story of the prodigal son is all about. It's this innate need and desire to have life experience, and that drives us through the entire cycle.
Now, let me give you a commercial. We have the book. If anybody's interested in buying the book, we have them available.
If any of you actually made it to the end of this chapter, which is the longest one in the book,
Yeah.
John Algeo quotes something similar. He says that same thing in a slightly different way. He says, God sleeps in the mineral, dreams in the vegetable, awakens in the animal, and becomes self-conscious in humanity and universally conscious in the Christ or higher self of all beings. So there's an expansion of awareness through the different kingdoms of life. And the mineral world is a kingdom of life, as we'll talk about. There is life in all matter. There is no inanimate matter in the cosmos. So this graphic does a decent job of creating a visual for the prodigal son's journey. A decent job. We'll talk about why I say only decent. So let's study this for a moment. So for those of you at home, if you sent the PDF of this, now you see kind of a cycle here. You see on the left side, the arrow points down, and that would refer to the involutionary part of the arc. So the descent, so to speak, or the restriction into matter, from spirit into matter. And then you see the cycle, it's going clockwise. There's an upward movement on the right side back towards, it says the logos, but you can replace that with whatever word you want, divine, absolute, if you want to call it God or pure being. That would be the ultimate energy in all of the universe. So on the left side, you see a few words here, Atma, Buddhi, Manas. Those refer to the different koshas, or the different layers of material that pure spirit kind of wraps itself in as it begins to manifest in the physical world. Right. The reason why I say this chart is only, it's only decent is because the minerals, as you see the minerals on the left side there, that still looks like it is kind of above the bottom, and it puts vegetables at the bottom. That's not really accurate. The plant world is more evolved than the mineral world. So the minerals should either be on the very bottom or actually on the right side, on the evolutionary part. Because in the mineral world, spirit is gaining experience. So the upward arc moves through minerals, then plants, then animals, then humans, and then above. So with that being said, what kind of experience would consciousness receive or realize in the mineral world? What kind of experience? What kind of lessons can a rock learn?
They go to school.
Rock school.
Temperature.
Yeah, exactly. Very basic things to us, because that's not us. We're far removed. But yeah, the sensation of pressure, heat,
Rain.
What did we talk about?
erosion.
What do
do they feel?
minerals
Minerals.
experience?
Why would consciousness exist in the mineral world? To gain these kinds of basic age, sure.
Transformation.
Yes, yeah. What do you think is transforming? Do you mind if I? What do you think? What do you think is transforming?
Well, like all that pressure, you take a rock and through thousands of years of pressure, constant pressure, and all the elements that push it and form it, you get, for example, a diamond or minerals or gems.
So
You
my-
nailed
That
it.
transformation is probably similar to maybe our journey, our transformation that we're going through.
He nailed it.
Yeah.
There was a nail. He.
So this is the first step of what I was mentioning earlier, just this sense of existence. How would you know that you even existed if you didn't feel something, pressure, heat, whatever the sensation is? The very first thing that any consciousness perceives is, oh, I exist. There is something.
I have a question, and this is gonna sound naive, and like I didn't do my homework, but I think I did. Is monad, does that indicate the beginning? What exactly is monad? It's an atom? I kept relating it to the soul.
It's a vague concept. For our purposes, spirit and monad can be your
One-
higher self,
okay.
spirit, monad.
Okay,
You don't really need to dive into the distinctions. There are.
okay.
That's for the advanced class. This is the basic
There you
class.
go.
There you go.
It's sort of like the term atom. Atom, yes, has a distinct meaning in chemistry and physics, but it also means the basic unit. So monad, it describes the most primitive or the very first individualization or distinction from the absolute. So
See, that's why I think that
it
it's soul.
is very vague. It's a very
Yeah.
vague term, and I've never heard it explained real properly. But I think the Atma is probably the next differentiation below that. And I have a good explanation of Atma, and possibly Monad too, would be an analogy would be like the ocean. The ocean is this amorphous something, but you see waves and you see whirlpools and you see energy lines that form certain things, and then it all dissipates again. So it's not real distinct, but it's the only thing that would differentiate something from this mass that is undefinable.
And as water from the ocean evaporates, it's still of the same material. It just changes to vapor, and then it might condense into a cloud above and then fall back to the ocean as a drop of water. And then once the drop of water falls back into the ocean, it becomes one again. It was never really different, but it was slightly differentiated, so to speak.
And it has more experience now.
And it had the experience. Yeah. It did its own little
Yeah,
prodigal
that's
journey.
Yeah.
Stephanie, did you want to say something? For my purposes, I actually view monad, atma, and spirit, those I kind of, there isn't really a practical reason to separate them too much in my opinion, my perspective.
Remember that any of these really more advanced, higher concepts, we can only perceive very vaguely. At the very best, we can perceive a little bit above where we are at currently. And anything beyond that is pure speculation, and we're kind of shooting in the dark. So don't worry about it. Don't expect that you have to be able to read the secret doctrine and understand it. Anybody who says they know the secret doctrine and understand it is probably hallucinating.
Talk about the cow. That's an ideal place to apply that, because I've been trying for the last 2 years to get through one of the 2 books. It's so difficult. I'll read it. I'll read a page and then I'll set it down and I'll say, "What did I just read?"
Which book is that you're talking about?
Isis Unveils What I'm Into.
Oh.
Sacred Doctrine is the big brother to Isis Unveils.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
So don't worry about what you can't understand. Pay attention to what you do understand and the concepts, the basic concepts. Those are far more important. If it doesn't have a practical application to your life, then it's maybe interesting, but it's not crucial at all at this point in your development.
I'm glad you brought that up, because this whole chapter, I've got to be honest, there really isn't a lot of practical application from it, although it's fascinating, and it's the pondering mind, the inquiring mind wants to know the purpose of life, but these are very vague concepts. So this chapter, it's very kind of, it's amorphous as Terry. So the details may or may not be important at all. It's just kind of fun. It's fun to discuss, the descent of the logos into material world and how it evolves. It puts everything into perspective a little bit. So take everything with a grain of salt and see if it makes sense to you.
Even if we can just get a brief hint of what is involved in this whole trajectory, this involution and evolution, that's all that is important at this stage. Get just this general concept of how life works and how what the different stages are, and that's good enough.
Was this downloaded by HPV?
Was it downloaded?
Did she receive it?
Channel.
She didn't read.
I mean, is that
She didn't read.
I mean, is that where this all comes
Yes,
from?
exactly.
That's the
This really comes from the secret doctrine, and that's why I say if people tell you that, yeah, they're an expert on the secret doctrine, maybe they are, but I haven't met anyone yet that I really was convinced was an expert on the secret doctrine. I don't think HPV considers herself an expert. In fact, just 1 second. In fact, one thing she pointed out several times was to her family members and friends was, if you think that I understand this, you're crazy. She said, this
Oh,
is
that is
information
super
that I am given and I'm able to see it and write it down. But she said, I understand parts of it, but there's so much of it that I don't understand.
Albert Einstein had copies of the secret doctrine on his desk when he was working, and he referred to it quite frequently. But I don't think even he, as smart as he was, truly understood what the whole concept was.
Terry has a comment.
Well, yeah. How do I put this? Because, yeah, well, because I'm reading this and I'm thinking at points, this is very heady, okay?
Yeah, for sure.
And it's very lofty, and so I'm trying to grasp on something. So I grasped the idea from this reading about me, because that's the only way I can relate to it, that, you know, I related the monad, the atom, as part of the soul, like whatever my beginning was through all of the incarnations I've had. How many of them I've had, I don't know. The one common element to me in every one of those incarnations is my soul. That's it. And so that's why I said at the beginning, you know, what is the purpose of life? To me, you know, all of those incarnations represented something to me, to my soul, and my soul's growth. So that's, to me, why I feel that I'm being, I don't know what the word is, trained or educated. My soul is being educated through each lifetime to create these indelible lines that never forget. So I go into the next lifetime and whatever I'm supposed to learn, I do that or not. But I still carry those other lifetimes that things did take. And then at the end of it, and that's pretty lofty too, because I don't know what the end is, I'm one with spirit. And that to me,
I think you're making an excellent point here. If we want to synthesize the meaning of life in one word, I would say experience.
mhm,
And as we pointed out several times in our classes, anything that you have learned, you will always keep.
mhm.
You never have to go back and start from scratch. If you learned mathematics in a previous lifetime, yes, you have to review in the current lifetime to get back up to speed, but it will come back to you just like that.
It's the knowing.
And the person who's never studied it before will struggle and struggle because you struggled in a previous lifetime to learn that. So you never really forget anything. It's within you, as Jerry says. We don't need to know all the details. We don't need to know names and specific incidents that occurred, because you carry that with you. You carry the knowledge and the understanding with you. And when you see a situation intuitively, you know something about it because you've experienced it before. So experience can never be taken away from you.
Invaluable.
Going back to HPB for just a minute, does she claim that the book she wrote, The Secret Doctrine, was divinely revealed to her?
I don't think she would use the term divine. The Secret Doctrine was, as one of the masters stated, a triple production. It was the Master Moria, the Master Kutumi, and HPB. So they were the ones who knew the material by far the best. She was a pupil of one of those masters, and she was the conduit through which they transmitted this information. So divinely transmitted, they would, none of them call themselves gods. The masters addressed that at one point. They said, we don't consider ourselves gods, but we aspire to become at some point. A god meaning, I guess, and I'm completely guessing here, that they would consider a god, for example, the individual who was in charge of a planet or a solar system. So I don't know if that's what they had in mind, but definitely something higher than what they had achieved.
Or 7 solar systems.
Or
What was most of the information transmitted psychically to her? I think that's what you're
Yeah,
asking.
that was my question.
okay. It was translated. She actually describes it. She says it's as if I'm looking in front of me and seeing. She didn't call it a movie because they didn't have movies in her day. But it's like it all was projected right in front of her, and she could see documents, she could see
Oh, wow.
concepts. It would be like what we would call a movie today, except even more intense than that, because she would see not only the results, but she would also be able to tap into the mind of the individuals who created the documents or created the movie and see what they were understanding and feeling and
So
seeing.
she wasn't a channel, or I don't know how, I mean,
Not
it
not
didn't
a
come
channel
through her, it came in front of her.
as far as just repeating words that were given to her. No,
Interesting.
it's a much more elaborate
Yeah.
presentation, and then the master Kutumi, for example, spoke very good English. I wish I could speak English as well. So sometimes specific words were given to her, but sometimes and quite often she had to come up with the words on her own.
Wow.
Back to our chart.
Back to our chart.
That's a good look.
I'm glad Jerry brought up the fact that it's very heady and hard to grasp. Let's try to make it simple. Looking at the chart here, at this graphic, let's remind ourselves that the purpose of life, as Terry just said, very simply is for gaining experience, to gain experience. The purpose, and when we say life, we mean physical existence, to gain experience. Well, the form of a human body is the highest, the most advanced form on Earth currently. And so what Theosophy tells us is that consciousness had to go through a pre-qualification process almost, or a preemptive process in order to get to the physical, the human body. And those previous states, those preliminary steps are the other kingdoms of life. That's not coming from an egoic perspective. It's just that our bodies are advanced, our brains are advanced when compared to those of animals and those of plants and the bodies of minerals. We're far more advanced. So consciousness had to be prepared to inhabit the human body. And that's what this chart is depicting. It's depicting the path that the soul took before it was born into a human body. That might be the concept that's hardest to grasp, that our soul, it wasn't a soul then, I'm just using that term because it's familiar to us, soul, atma, spirit, monad, call it whatever you want. The consciousness that is us now wasn't always us. It was in other physical forms, gaining other lessons. The best analogy I can see out of all the analogies we've talked about is the idea of school, of grades in a school.
Mm-hmm.
So when a kid goes to preschool, that's a certain lesson plan that they're being exposed to. Then kindergarten, then first grade through fifth, then elementary school, then sixth, seventh, and eighth, middle school, then high school. Then there's more, right? There's more beyond high school. Then there's even more beyond college. There's post degrees and such. That's the exact thing that happens with the different kingdoms of life. So if you look at the top of the chart, it says logos. There's a whole bunch of fire. That would be analogous to the father's home in the prodigal son story. The estate, the grand estate where everything is easy. The sons don't have much work to do. Their father is rich. They have vast holdings of gold and silver, and they don't need to do much for themselves. Everything is provided for. However, there isn't much experience to be gained there. So something in the divine mind, in the energy of the universe, something causes, it's some kind of divine will, has the need or the desire for experience. So that's when manifestation happens. That's when this downward arc happens. So the logos or spirit sends little bits of itself down into the physical world to gain experience. So the physical world is either a planet, a solar system, a galaxy, however it manifests, and then it starts to spend the eons of time in each of these physical bodies, gaining all that the physical world can provide to it. So in the physical world, we heard what Ivan said, which was perfect. It experiences a transformation from something very basic to something quite refined. Now, the very basic mineral body, I'm putting it in quotes, would be something like granite or coal or just a very rough element. And then something more refined, as Ivan said exactly, the transformation into a diamond. And it's refined, it's rare. Diamonds are one of the most rare substances on Earth.
And the important part of this analogy